The talk is something to do with happiness, and my own little story of coming to Thailand. I became a Buddhist while I was still in UK, and a very simple reason, because when I was about 16, I realized that religion was important. That you needed some spirituality in your life. It's only later on I've made friends with many psychologists, and they told me that the teenage years, 14, 15, 16, 17, that many people in that age, they start to get highly interested in religions and spiritual practices. It's not just that young boys are thinking about girls and girls thinking about boys. They do actually think about the meaning of life. And certainly that was the age where I realized religion was important. But instead of just following the religion, which was closest, I thought that being a rational person, that you should find out what was on offer. It's what we call these days doing market research. So you don't just buy the car which your father bought and drive that, you check out what's available. So I remember getting many books on many different religions and reading the one on Buddhism and realizing that's the one I liked the best. And not just liked the best, it seemed to fit me very well. Then of course the trouble was finding a teacher and then finding some places you can hear talks and meditate, which was very difficult in UK in that time. But eventually I decided I'd love to become a monk one day. But available in England were monks from the Tibetan tradition, from the Chinese tradition, from Sri Lankan tradition, from the Thai tradition. And you know why I chose Thailand to come and become a monk? Because the Thai monks smiled the most. The Tibetan monks were number 2, but Thailand just won. Because even at that time, I realized if you're going to follow a spiritual path, which is supposed to ease the suffering in life and give you meaning and happiness, I wanted to see someone who was happy. Why sort of become a disciple of a miserable monk? So from that time on, I've encouraged people, if you're going to listen to a teacher of whatever religion, check them out first of all, and if they really are happy, then they know what they're talking about. There's one of our members over in Australia. She became our president of our society one year, but she wrote an autobiography about her journey, and she said that she had anxiety attacks, and she realized that one way of dealing with the anxiety attacks that she experienced unexpectedly, it could be in the shopping mall, it could be just on the train coming home. And these panic attacks would come from nowhere and literally cripple you, falling on the floor, not being able to move. And because it was so embarrassing for her and difficult for her, she did hear that meditation will help panic attacks enormously. So she came to my little meditation group. And then she noticed that these monks who came to teach were happy. And she thought, nah, they're just playing around when they're in front of people. They're not really happy when they leave the stage. So she started coming to our monastery, following us around, just to check out whether this happiness was real. When she found it was real, you're happy in all different situations and circumstances. That's why she got her confidence and faith. And she wrote in her book, whatever those monks were on, I wanted to get on it too. And so this is actually I can teach about happiness because I think many of you have known me for a long time, and I don't think you see me miserable in all the years. So at least I've got some ground in teaching what I know. And number 2, it is part of Buddhism. Sometimes people criticize me and say, oh, you just make this up, Ajahn Brahm. What's it got to do with Buddhism? But I know the teachings of the Buddha. I know Pali. What the Buddha said, he only teaches 2 things. He teaches suffering and the end of suffering. In other words, how to be happy, how to lessen the problems of life and get more peace and more happiness. And one of the reasons why this type of teachings has been popular is because it delivers the goods. It does take away people's pain and suffering and makes them more happy. So actually, how can we do that? And the first teaching here is, again, from my own master, Ajahn Chah. He said this, and he was a down-to-earth teacher. And I think that's another thing which is important when you hear teachings. You've got to speak in people's local languages in ways that they can understand and remember for a long time. Because sometimes when you give a talk, it's very theoretical, very high, and people they don't really understand it. However, there's some words which I can use in Australia I can't really use in Bangkok. But nevertheless, this is what's one of Ajahn Chah's favourite stories. It was the story of the two chicken farmers. And I've used this to great effect. I remember when I told this to a conference on psychologists and psychiatrists. As soon as I finished it, they stopped, wrote it down, and they said afterwards that's one of the stories they use commonly in their practice to heal the suffering of people with trauma, who have depression, who have guilt, who have a lot of pain and suffering in their life. In fact, I gave a talk recently, it was on YouTube, and I mentioned that story, and it was shown to a group of prisoners in jail, and they started crying afterwards. It was how to let go of the pain of the past. And these were very hard guys in jail for various crimes. And when they learned how to let go of the past, you can imagine how much pain that took away from their hearts. So the story is there's two chicken farmers. The first chicken farmer gets up early in the morning, goes into the shed with his basket to collect the produce of the night before. And so he takes the basket into the chicken shed and he fills the basket full of chicken poo. You know what chicken poo is? Those little pellets? In Australia I use a different word, but I'm not allowed to use that here. You use that at home, but I'm not allowed to, because I'm a monk, and this is Thailand. But anyway, fills it full of chicken poo and brings the poo back into the house. And so it stinks the whole house out, and he's a very dumb chicken farmer. Chicken farmer number 2 takes the basket into the shed and fills it full of eggs. He leaves the poo in the shed to rot because it will become valuable fertilizer later. But you don't bring the chicken poo into the house with you. You bring the eggs back into the house. So he brought the eggs back into the house where he could make a nice omelette for his family's breakfast and sell the rest of the eggs in the market for cash. And the moral of that story is this: when you remember your past, when you collect the produce of your past, what do you put in your basket and bring into the present with you? Are you poo collectors or egg collectors? You know, most people are poo collectors. Whatever went wrong, whatever someone said to you, whatever mistake you made, whatever suffering you endured in the past, that's what you remember. And all the nice stuff which happened, you forget. We are poo collectors, which is one of the reasons why we're not happy. How many of you have got photograph albums? Maybe these days you just put it on a memory stick. But in the old days, you'd have these photograph albums. And when you have photograph albums, you have photographs of maybe going on holiday with your family. Photographs of you, your graduation from university, or photographs of your marriage. You keep all the happy photographs so that when you're depressed, you can open up those photograph albums and remember the happy times and feel good. How many people have photographs of their divorce? How many have got photographs of being stuck in the Bangkok traffic on a Monday going to work? How many people have got photographs of doing the homework at school or doing the final exam before university? How many people have got photographs when they're sick in hospital? We don't take those photographs and keep them, do we? At least in the photograph albums, we only keep the happy photographs. And the photographs of divorce, the photographs of having an argument with our partner, the photographs, all those negative photographs, never make it into the album. Now that's a good photograph album. So what about the photograph album between your ears? Your memory. What type of photograph do you keep in there? Please take away and throw away all the unpleasant photographs, because those unpleasant photographs, of the argument, of the divorce, of the death, of being stuck in Bangkok traffic, of losing all your money on the stock market, of disappointment, whatever it was. All those unhappy photographs, because you keep them, that's one of the reasons why we're not so happy. It's strange, it's weird. You have the choice in what you remember. Why do we remember all the poo, all the problems and the pain? We don't have to do that. We can let it go. And in order to let it go, sometimes people say, well, how do you actually do this? Give me some practical advice on how to let these things go. Because we've all had a lot of pain in our past. So number one is to realize it's part of life and you haven't done anything wrong. When I was a school teacher for 1 year, there may be some school teachers here, I had to set examinations, set tests for my students. And I was told, if you're going to set a test, this was mathematics, that's what I was teaching at the time. If you're going to be setting a test in mathematics, that you have to make sure that it's just at the right level of hardness, but not too hard. Because if it's too hard and your students get 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10, or 3 out of 10 at the most, they get dispirited. They feel they can't do mathematics. They feel they're failures. And part of educating anybody is giving them confidence and encouragement. But if everyone gets 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, it's just too easy. There's no real test there. So I was told to set the examinations so the average score should be about 7 or 8. The lowest score maybe 5 or 6. At least they got most of the questions right. And if too many people got 10 out of 10, it was just too easy. Because I needed to encourage people, to motivate them. Yes, they can do things. Yes, they are successful. Yes, they're able to do mathematics, but also find out their weaknesses. So, when they got 7 out of 10, I could find out where they were weak, where they made their mistakes. So in the next few lessons, I could address their weaknesses and make them stronger. That's what a test was there for, to motivate the kids, but also to find out their weaknesses. And that's exactly the same with life. If in life you get 10 out of 10, then there's not much point to life. If you only get 1 or 2 out of 10, again, you just get so depressed, you lose your motivation. But no one will get 10 out of 10 in life. You will always stuff up sometimes, make mistakes, do stupid things, and suffer as a result. But that's important, because that's where you learn your weaknesses, and that's where you grow from. So the trouble is, most people think that life should be 10 out of 10. That you should have no suffering, have everything going well in life, never make mistakes, always be successful. And of course, that's totally impossible. And if it was possible, it wouldn't be much of a life. So in life, we can expect the tough questions from time to time. We can expect a little bit of pain and suffering, because that is where the cutting edge of life is. That's where we learn, that's where we grow, and that's where we become far more better human beings, richer, because of the pain we've gone through. Now, I've known many, many people who've had many, many difficulties, not just, say, the prisoners in jail, but so many people who have suffered in life because of divorces, because of deaths, because of other disappointments they've had in life. And of course, when they come to you for some counselling, the first thing you do is just to put them at ease. But the last thing I do is to just stay with just comforting them. Because if I just comforted them, oh, you poor thing, never mind, I'd be missing the great opportunity for growth, spiritual growth, to make them happier in the future. Because all those pains we call in Buddhism growing pain. And growing pain means that there is something you're going to learn. Something beautiful is going to happen. Just like if you ever had a garden, if you see sort of the flowers just before they bloom, they're in this very tight bud. And you can imagine what it's like to be in that bud. There's all this pressure building up. All this, like the birth pains. But once it bursts, you have this beautiful flower. So often, many of the beautiful things in life just come just after some irritation or pain even. From suffering, we get beautiful wisdom. And also, this beautiful thing of like understanding and compassion. Now, to mention this, to explain it to you, it's very nice to have an accompanying to the talk. But don't worry, if you do have any mobile phones go off, that's what mobile phones do. That's what they expect it to do. And as I say that, you can't get 10 out of 10. With all the people in this room, one person is going to leave their mobile phone off. So that's very, very embarrassing, lots of suffering. But because of that suffering, you can actually learn something next time. So this was a good case in point of what happens. It has to happen all the time. But where we can learn something from the pain and suffering in life, then afterwards we found out, my goodness, it was worth it. In some of the talks which I've given, trying to help people who really need help, not just prisoners, but say people with cancer. I always give a talk at the Cancer Support Association in Western Australia every year. They usually come to my monastery every year, or to the Melanoma Foundation. And these are people, who biopsies have said you've got cancer. And just taking them through all the ways through their cancers. Sometimes they make it, sometimes they don't. And when they do actually make it, even if they don't make it, I don't know how many times, at the end of the cancer, one way or the other, they come up to me and confide and say that was the best thing that ever happened to them. I've never had cancer. Obviously I hope I never will. But what they actually said when it's the best thing that ever happened to them struck me the first time. How can you say that? It's very unpleasant. It's a lot of suffering and pain. How can you say that was the best thing which ever happened to me? And they explained, it really showed them the meaning of life. And it showed them what happiness truly is, in spite of all these things. And it's because of people like that, I developed that story about the truckload of dung. There's a lot of dung stories and poo stories, in my talks, simply because that's a very good indication of what suffering is. If you have a truckload of dung, similarly, it's like you go home after this talk and you find in front of your house or your apartment somebody has delivered a whole truckload of the smelliest, stinkiest stuff you can imagine. Poo, dung, ki kwai. I can say that in Thai, but I can't say that in English. And there's two things about that ki kwai. That means that's water buffalo poo. There's two things about that dung. Number one, you didn't order it. It's not your fault. How many times in life has there been pain and suffering and you think, why me? I didn't do that. It's unfair. So that's the first thing. It's not your fault. Number two, no one saw the delivery man coming. They didn't take the address or the registration number of the vehicle. So you can't call up someone to take it away. You're stuck with it. And of course you understand what that simile means. When these things happen to you in life, you often think, why me? I didn't deserve that. I've done nothing. Much of the suffering in life is like that. And number two, you can't ring up somebody to get them to take it away. You're stuck with it. Your friends can put their arm around you. You can go and see a good monk or a good teacher or something, but we can't take it away. It's your dung. But what we can do is to say there's two ways of dealing with the dung of life. And the first way that people deal with the dung of life, the suffering of life, is to put it in their pockets, in their bags, up their shirts, down their trousers. And they carry it around with them. And you find if you carry around dung, you lose a lot of friends. You stink. Now, in that simply, what that means is when you do have a lot of suffering, you get very negative, very angry, even depressed. With the best will in the world, it's very hard to spend time with negative people. We all like to hang out with the positive ones. It's nature, we can't do much about that. So you tend to lose a lot of friends if you're negative. But there's another way of dealing with dung. And the other way of dealing with dung is actually to dig it into your garden. It takes a lot of hard work digging in the dung of life. But you've got no choice. And once you dig it in, it takes sometimes months, sometimes years. Every day the pile of dung gets less and less. Every day the flowers and the fruit in your tree gets more and more. Until one day when you've actually dug in the dung of your life, you have this incredibly beautiful garden. The flowers are just so incredibly beautiful that their fragrance is smelt by everybody who passes by. And the fruit is so delicious and juicy that you give so much to your friends. And they wonder why your mangoes and bananas and papaya are so more sweet than anywhere else. You know, I know that from experience. I spent one beautiful year up in the north of Thailand, up in the mountains, and there was a papaya tree just outside a cave. It was where the bats would poo as they went out of the cave at night time, where they pooed on the way back in again. And that was the most delicious papaya I've ever tasted. And it was all because of the bat poo. And that's true. I never tasted papaya like that ever again. And that's what I was really tasting. I was tasting poo, transformed into delicious papaya. And that's what happens. Your suffering, your pain, your disappointment, once it's dug in, becomes this juicy wisdom and sweet compassion. That's what those people meant who suffered from cancer, who said it's the best thing which ever happened to them. They learnt about life, and they learnt about kindness and compassion, and how beautiful that was. So these are the things which we learn from the difficulties of life. And it's really good to actually to listen, to people who know what they're talking about. That's when I saw an Ajahn Brahm. He actually told me to do things which I didn't think were possible. Just like, learning to dig in the suffering of life and growing wisdom and compassion from them. Because I always thought that I'd do it my way. There's a story which someone told me very recently. A very simple story, but very profound in its meaning. How many of you like bananas? When you eat a banana, what end do you start peeling it from? Because most people peel it at the stalk end. And that just shows how stupid we are. Because who are the experts with bananas? Monkeys. Monkeys are expert with bananas. And you look at a monkey, how a monkey eats a banana. And he will start with the other end, the end which is where the flower was. And if you try the next time you eat a banana, try and peel it from the other end. And you will actually find it's much easier, and the banana doesn't get so squashed. Now, try it out. It's true. I only found that out about a month ago. I told people, I've been experimenting too, and it's actually true. For years, I've been peeling the banana from the wrong end. And I should have been following the experts, the monkeys. Now, when it comes to suffering, not the monkeys, but the monks, there is a great difference. We are the experts. And so we peel the banana the correct end. So listen, just whenever there's any suffering around, dig it in, stop complaining, get on with the work. And you will find you will learn from that. One of the things which happens when people have suffering in their life, we do the blame game. And the blame game, it's her fault, it's his fault, or more likely, it's my fault. I didn't do the right thing, I could have done more. And that type of guilt or anger has caused so much suffering in this world, and it is crazy for people to feel so guilty like that. So in order to overcome that guilt, it's important to have that compassion and that wisdom. If you have made a mistake in life, punishing yourself for it does not work at all. In fact, that was one of the great things which impressed me with Buddhism. There was no punishment there. People actually came up to try and kill the Buddha, and then when they couldn't kill him, he was just too nice a guy to be killed. And when they came up and said, I was going to assassinate you, he said, never mind that. And it's amazing just how quickly that forgiveness came. And I learned just the power of forgiveness, that no matter what you did, everything could be forgiven. An important story which illustrates that is, I was introduced as being the abbot of a monastery. So it's my job to train people. And so there was, in our system, the same as in Wat Papa, Wat Nanachad, if you've been up there, that for the first year, you have to be what we call an anagarika, wear white and keep 8 precepts. And if you pass the character test, yes, you behave yourself and you like the place likes you, then you can take novice ordination, which is 10 precepts, the samanera. And after 1 year, if the Sangha approves, you can take the full monk ordination. So there's a lot of training there before you can even become a monk. In our tradition, we call that quality control, QC. So, there was this young man, and he was training to become a monk. He was still in that stage of being an anagarika, keeping the 8 precepts. And many of you know, one of those precepts, even for anagarikas, is you're not allowed to eat in the afternoon or the evening, not allowed to have any food. And so one day this man came up to me, and he said he hadn't slept all night. Something had been worrying him. The previous afternoon, he'd felt hungry. And he got into the kitchen while no one was watching and made himself a sandwich because he was hungry. And he felt so guilty about that. He came up to me and said, I feel so bad, I'm sorry. And I explained to him, in Buddhism, in Dharma, as long as you acknowledge your mistake, you tell people or tell somebody, you acknowledge your mistake, then that's all you need to do. Acknowledge, let it go, and learn from the experience. So I said, that's all you've done, great. You've told me, that's wonderful. Now, let's make sure that never happens again. Now, eat more at lunchtime. And if you are hungry, there's all these other little things you can drink, like fruit juices, or honey, sugar, even some things like dark chocolate or cheese in some monasteries. There's always something you can eat if you really, really feel hungry. But you don't need to make yourself a sandwich anymore. Okay, you can go now. When I just told him he could go, he said, no. He said, that's not good enough. I need some punishment, some penance. Because if you don't punish me, I'll do it again. So he really put me on the spot. And I thought, my goodness, how can I treat a guy like this? And as it happened, that particular morning, I'd been reading a book on Australian history. And many of you know that Australia started as a colony for convicts. And those convicts, 200 years ago, were treated terribly. If they made any mistake or broke any rule, they were actually flogged, with a cat of 9 tails. So I just read that story, and so it was fresh in my mind. So when he asked for a punishment, I looked him in the eye and said, I've got a good, traditional Australian punishment for you. 50 strokes of the cat. And this was like an Australian guy. He didn't really have much understanding of Buddhism. He actually thought that I was going to whip him, and his face went whiter than his clothes. That's not what he expected. And then I told him what 50 strokes of the cat means in a Buddhist monastery. At that time we had 2 cats. Find one of them and stroke him. 1, 2, 3, 4. Learn some compassion, you angry man. And that's usually my punishment, which I give out to people who've made mistakes in Buddhist monasteries. Give them, if they're really bad, 100 strokes of the cat. Find a cat and stroke it 50 times or 100 times and learn some kindness. And from that compassion, you may be able to give that compassion to yourself and forgive yourself. Because that's what kindness does. It understands, yes, you've done 7 out of 10. That's not bad. We all make mistakes. Be kind. learn and grow from the pain of life. And that way, we don't have so much suffering in life. Or if someone else has hurt you or mistreated you, why on earth do we keep on remembering it? They've hurt you once, and you allow them to hurt you every time you remember that. That is totally crazy. So if they said, the example is, someone calls you a pig, and you think, why did they call me a pig? They've got no right to call me a pig. I'm not a pig. And if you're wise, you realize you've just allowed them to call you a pig 3 more times. Every time you think about it, they're calling you a pig again. And you're suffering again. They cheated me. They maligned me. They were cruel to me. Every time you remember it, they're hurting you again, aren't they? So if you're a wise person, they'll only hurt you once. They call me a pig. And you let it go. You don't keep the unpleasant photographs of life. But again, sometimes it's very difficult to forgive, especially if someone's hurt you very badly. So another way of doing this acknowledgement and forgiveness and letting things go, which is, again, I teach this to the psychologists and they sort of go and teach it to other people. I recently gave a talk in a group funded by the Australian government, which is looking after people who had suffered torture and trauma. You know, there's many people who are refugees. Ooh. Okay, that's probably the ghost. I hope you're not afraid of ghosts. No, you get it right. Okay, it's getting better. Usually, the people who are migrating to Western countries may have suffered incredible sort of pain and torture from some of these conflicts, in our modern world. And it's not just a question of coming to a nice land and getting on with their life. They have the physical and emotional scars which go very deep. And if you actually talk to them, they tell you what they've gone through. I mean, it makes your skin creep, the sort of pain and torture which they've experienced. And the people who are working with these, one of them invited me to give a talk at their centre. And I said, why? And they said, because they got permission, or they got the authority to counsel these people because of what they learned at university. But he said all the practical stuff they learned from me and from the talks, from Buddhism, and this was the sorts of stories which worked for them, to get people who had really been badly hurt to let things go. And in order to do that, I told the following story, and I've told this to somebody in the retreat in Phuket, where I just came from yesterday. Because many people have got a lot of anger and pain and guilt inside of them, which stops them being happy. So you can't hide it. You can't sort of deny that, whether you were guilty or not, you feel guilty. That's the reality of your perception. So I said, write it down. You've got to bring it up, acknowledge it. So you have to write it down on a piece of paper. What you think you did. Or what you think they did. So all your pain, write it down on a piece of paper, I said. And the best piece of paper to use is what we call toilet paper. Because that's where the poo stuff actually belongs. So write it down on some toilet paper. And once you've written down all the things you thought you've done wrong, all of your pain, once it's all written down, read it again. And then once you've read it the second time, put it where toilet paper belongs, in the bowl, press the button and let it go. So I've been telling that for years, and someone said they did that, they cried. They wept. Because they'd acknowledged, they let it go. Because sometimes with letting go, just saying I'm going to let go, I'm going to forgive is not enough. You need to do something to reinforce a psychological movement of your mind which lets things go with something physical as well. So they were free. So this is actually how we let these things go. And when we let go of the pain of the past and the difficulties we've done, with a bit of compassion, with a bit of wisdom, it actually frees us to focus more on the other part of life, which is the happy part of life. Now, one of our other problems is that people keep saying that if you keep focusing on the happy part of life, then you're not recognizing the mistakes of life, and you should be learning from the mistakes. But you learn much more from the happiness of life than you ever learn from mistakes. When you learn from what went right, it's number one, it encourages you, motivates you, and number two, you learn the secrets of success. Why did it work? Now, for those of you who have relationships with your partner, with your children, with your parents, why is that such a huge source of suffering sometimes? One of the reasons is because whenever there's a mistake, we keep pondering over it, and we think if we keep looking at that mistake again and again, we'll find out why, so we'd never do that mistake again. That does not work. You've got to let the mistakes go, and instead learn from the successes. When you learn from the successes, it means that, why did that work? Why do we have a wonderful day with my partner today? Why do I have this great afternoon with my kid? Why? Instead of taking the successes and the good times for granted, which is our big mistake, instead we really ponder over that wonderful afternoon we had with someone. Why? Why was that just a beautiful time together? There we learn the secrets of happiness. When it's happy most of our time, we just take it for granted. When it fails, we think about it. It should be the other way around. When it fails, let it go. When it's happy, think about it, ponder it. Why? And then, of course, you'll learn the secrets of success and the secrets of happiness and how easy it is to be happy in this world once we know those secrets. And of course, one of those secrets of happiness is, again, just to put a bit of energy and a bit of joy in life. It doesn't cost anything to smile. And for those of you who wonder, a lot of times people say, I smile a lot. How do I smile? Because I've done smiling training. Just like anything else, if you're going to play tennis, you get a coach. If you're going to play the piano, you get a coach. So I'm a smiling coach. Teach people how to smile. And so those of you who are miserable, and many of you look very miserable, that's much better, you're laughing now. The smiling training is this. I was taught this while I was at university, because my meditation teacher saw that I wasn't smiling very much and was too miserable, and he said, look, every morning when you wake up, what's the first thing you do? And I said, go to the toilet. And he said, great, is there a mirror in the toilet? I said, of course there is. He said, before you actually urinate, stand in front of the mirror, look at yourself and smile. Do smiling training. And I had to tell him, as a young man, I wasn't born a monk. You stay up late at night with your friends, with your girlfriend, getting up to all sorts of mischief. And usually in the morning, if you remember those days, you'd be afraid to look at yourself in the morning. You'd be scared of what you saw in the mirror. And so, he laughed too, and he said, look in front of the mirror and smile at yourself. And if you can't manage a natural smile, he said, get your 2 fingers, put them on the side of your mouth and push up. And I've been doing that for years. For 2 years I did that without stopping. I had faith in that. And that was called smiling training. You exercise the muscles here so you can smile much more. And of course I've taught that to many other people. And look, if ever you get disappointed or distressed in life, if anything something really brings you down, what an easy thing to do. It's much better than taking the Prozac. It's much cheaper than going to see a psychiatrist. Find a mirror somewhere. Look at your face in the mirror. If you can't manage a natural smile, push up. And if you do that, you find that, you see this stupid young girl or middle-aged woman in the mirror making a face. You laugh. You're laughing at yourself, you're laughing at life, and that's a good attitude to have. Because it puts all of the pain and difficulties in life into perspective. You're becoming a happy person. And look, even when I was at Cambridge, actually this was just, I got caught into this, conned into it, like in rowing in an 8, you know the Oxford and Cambridge boat race? I never got that far, because I'm not competitive enough. I'm just too compassionate. If the other team really wanted to win, yeah, you can win. That's why I said that, there's no such thing as a Buddhist soccer team. If we actually did start a Buddhist soccer team, we'd do it on Buddhist principles, so if the other team wanted the ball, come on, let go, you can have it. And if they couldn't score a goal, we'd score one for them. Compassion, kindness. May everybody be happy. That's why we haven't got a Buddhist soccer team. Or maybe that's why the Thai soccer team never does well. There's too many Buddhists in it. So I never actually got into sort of that. But there I was rowing. And the reason was because they had these little receptions. It was free sherry. Now, I was a young man. Anything free, free. I wasn't born a Buddhist, okay? Free booze, and I was there for it. And so I went there, and just before I knew it, I'd signed up. So they conned me into going into this rowing. And I remember one day being in a race. It was good exercise. I made some good friends there. I'm going in this race, and it was a really long race, and I was really tiring. I was wearing out. And I always remember the coach, was on his bicycle, on the footpath, with his megaphone. He shouted out at me. He said, "You're making such an ugly face. Smile, for goodness sake." And at that age, you're willing to try anything, even though you're in great pain. Just trying your best to pull that oar as fast as you could. I smiled, and I noticed, that was the first time, that when you smile, it's much easier. You get a boost of energy. It's everybody, every doctor knows that, every neurologist. Whatever you're doing in life, if you put a smile on your face, it's much easier to do. Even again, first year in northeast Thailand, that was reinforced again. Because in those days, to go from one monastery to another in the northeast, you'd go on, Wat Song Teo, which was, like a pickup truck with a tray in the back. Now those senior monks, they were in the front having a great time. We were in the back on these wooden benches, packed in there. And because to protect you from the rain or even the dust, there was this metal frame which was stretched over the back. I think you might still see them, maybe even in Bangkok. And over that frame was just a canvas. Now the trouble was, in those days, actually in the whole of Ubon, I think maybe only in the city there was a paved road. Out in the countryside, it was all dirt roads. So after the monsoon season, they were all potholed. So when that truck hit a pothole, the truck went down and I went up. And you smashed your head on these metal railings. Now, it's all right for most of you because you've got padding. I've got bald head. And I was, Farang, in those days, Westerners, we were taller than the other people, so I was the first to hit my head. And on a bald head too. And my goodness, that hurt. And what did I do, being a Westerner? You swore. Because that's what Westerners do when you're hurt, damn it, or whatever. But every now and again, the pothole was deep enough, even the Thai monks hit their head too. And they never swore. They laughed. I could not figure that out. Why is it that you hit your head and it hurts so much and you laugh? Now, I remember I was trained in Cambridge as a scientist, so I used a scientific method. First of all, I started using reason. My first theory was that those Thai monks had hit their heads so many times they were brain damaged. Which is why they laughed. And then I realized, hang on, no, it can't be true. Because I knew these people, they were very smart and intelligent. So the next thing I did, again, was do an experiment. I determined the next time I hit my head, I wouldn't swear, I'd force myself to laugh instead. Just like the Thai monks. And that's where I learned this amazing piece of Dhamma, this great teaching of Buddhism. That if you hit your head and you laugh, it hurts much less. If you don't believe me, ask the person sitting next to you. to hit you on the head. If you laugh, it actually hurts less. It's obvious. But a lot of times we get so negative in life that when it really does hurt, when life hurts, when we make a mistake, we swear inside, stupid me. When someone else hurts us, we get angry back, we swear. And that's why life hurts more than it should. So the next time that someone calls you a pig, laugh. The next time that the doctor says, you've only got 10 weeks to live, burst out laughing. That's what one of my friends, he was the head monk over in Kuala Lumpur, Dr. Kesri Dhammananda. He's a Sri Lankan monk. He died a year or 2 years ago. His biographer quoted his doctor. His oncologist, as soon as he found out that the cancer was terminal, there was no more treatment possible, the doctor told this monk, and the monk burst out laughing. He said that's the first time he's seen anybody laugh when they've heard their cancer is terminal. Now that's impressive. That's Buddhist. That's what you should do. So next time they say that, just laugh. You'll find it hurts much less. Why not? It's terminal anyway. Did you hear about that person who went to see their doctor and it said it was terminal cancer? He said, how long have I got to live? And the doctor said, 10. And he said, 10 what? 10 years? 10 months? 10 days? And the doctor continued, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. That's terminal. So a little bit of laughter. I mean, why not have that little bit of laughter in life, even when things go wrong? Because what that does, every doctor knows, increases your immune system, when you laugh. And also, look, I must admit, I've been putting on weight. It's not my fault, it's your fault. You feed me too much. And you bring me all this delicious food and you say, Ajahn Brahm, eat this. I made this specially just for you. And out of compassion, I eat it. But there's one thing I found out. I'm actually in pretty good health. One of the reasons I'm in good health is because I laugh a lot. And someone actually showed me this scientific paper, because they keep sending me scientific paper, being ex-scientists. And this was a scientific paper which actually was showing that actually when you laugh, when you're happy, your arteries in your veins expand. They get larger. But when you actually get miserable, they actually contract. It's a well-known fact. So if you are overweight and you're miserable, it's a double whammy, as they say in the West. You've got more gut going through your veins and your veins get smaller. But if you are overweight and you laugh a lot, it balances. Yeah, you've got more gut going through your veins, but they're wider so they can get through without any problems. And that's why, have you ever noticed all the fat people are jolly people? Because the fat, miserable ones died a long time ago. It's just the law of evolution. So if you are overweight, laugh more. It's saving your life. So a little bit of smiling training means that whatever happens in life, we can actually look at the positive side of it. And the negative side of it is just learning. It's that 3 out of 10 where we make mistakes. The 7 out of 10, please keep that in mind. You're still doing really, really well. You had a lovely life. Forgive yourself, learn from it, and grow. And you'll find that whatever happened to you in your life, that people are just so hard upon themselves. And we're so critical. One of the reasons of being critical is that, again, this is, I know this from my Buddhism, but it's also reinforced with modern psychology. People say that people will always accept criticism. They will hear it. They maybe argue about it, but they always listen to criticism. And praise they just don't listen to at all. Because this fellow told me in a psychology conference, he said it's been proved that on average, you have to praise your wife for at least 15 seconds before she hears it. It's true. For the first few seconds, you're praising, oh, you're a wonderful wife, I really love you, it's just so good with the kids. She actually doesn't hear it. She's thinking, oh, what does he want? Here he goes again, or whatever. It takes a long time to get in. And after 15 seconds, then actually she hears it. It's been well known that. But you criticize her, you're fat, you're lazy. She hears it straight away. Not even half a second. So look, if you really want to sort of show how much you love your wife, and really say maybe her birthday, you may be sort of feeling romantic, remember at least 15 seconds worth. Darling, you're so beautiful, you're so wonderful, I'm really lucky to have married someone like you, you're so good with your kids, you're so kind and compassionate. 13 seconds, I've got to keep going on. That's actually very true. And the same with husbands as well. Why is that? Why is that we keep on receiving criticism and we don't receive praise? It's a weird way of our life, because a lot of time when you were all at school, when I was at school, I was told if you receive praise, if you think you're good, you get a big head. And if you receive sort of criticism, you're being humble. And we've learned that so well that these days we filter out any positive comment about ourselves. And anything bad about ourselves we dwell upon, which is one of the reasons why we're not happy at all. So, I encourage each one of you to develop a mind which will let go of criticism, but which will receive praise. So when you're criticized, it takes at least 15 seconds to get in. When you're praised, you receive it straight away. So the next time someone says thank you, don't just, oh, that was nothing. Instead say, yes, I deserve that. Why are you laughing? Because it's not done, is it? It's not the way we're supposed to do things. People think you're egotistical and proud. No, they said thank you. In other words, you're respecting. They're wise enough to have actually seen you've done something good, and they said thank you to you. So I respect the person who's thanked you. Say, yes, I deserve that, you're right. Because also, when you learn how to accept praise from other people, maybe, just maybe, you'll give yourself some praise. In other words, you realize you're not such a bad person, after all. And because inside of ourselves we're always criticizing ourselves, we always think we're inadequate, we're not good enough, that we've got too many faults. Because of that, that's one of the reasons we don't have any happiness and freedom. Why we're not confident. Why we can't come up on a stage like I'm doing and just talk from the hip, not without any notes, and just have a great time. Because when I make mistakes, I just forget about those. But when it works, I always remember it. That's why I just have a good time as a monk. Now, quite often I tell jokes, as you know, and sometimes those jokes fall flat. But sometimes actually they work. So, I don't know if you heard about those two men who were wanting to buy a dog. And one said to the other, well, what dog should I get? He said, I'm going to get a Labrador, a golden Labrador. And his friend said, don't buy a Labrador, don't buy a Labrador. He said, why not? He said, haven't each one of you noticed that half the people who own Labradors go blind? Come on! Because most of the guide dogs, the seeing eye dogs, are Labradors. You're blind before you get one, not the other way around. Now you see, there you go. So some of you got the joke, some of you didn't get the joke. But I don't mind if you don't get the joke. I'm not going to remember that. I'm going to remember all of you who did get the joke. So having that type of positive mind means you actually learn about happiness, which means you are accentuating those things which work in life. You're learning from that good part of life. And you're, of course, as far as your future is concerned, you're not worrying so much. While I was in Phuket, teaching a retreat next to the beach, somebody said there was an email going around Thailand that last week there would be a tsunami and it would hit Phuket. Did you hear that one? Yes, some of you did. Why on earth do people worry about such things? It never happened. But people always like worrying about the future. That's the other reason why we're not happy. For those of you who want to go deep, you know why we want to worry about the future? It's not we're afraid of the future, but we're afraid of peace. We always want something to do. We're just afraid of just sitting down here and being happy. So if we've got nothing to do today, if everything is going well in our life, we want to go and worry about something else. We worry about the elections. We worry about sort of the tsunamis which never come. We worry about the end of the world. We worry, if we don't want to worry about imaginary things, we go and turn on the TV and worry about the next episode in the soap opera you're following. Why on earth do you do such things? Now, it's a long time since I've lived out there in the world, but I've seen in the newspapers and magazines, which I am allowed to read, these theme parks. Now, when I was a kid, I used to go to these theme parks, these little roller coasters like you have now in Disneyland. But that was so tame. What they have these days is these death drops and things which turn you upside down 3 or 4 times. And people actually pay to be tortured like that. And what's going wrong with you guys? What? Because we'll do anything, and rather just be here and be happy. Now, going to the deeper part of this talk now. There's a very beautiful saying, which I've been repeating many times in the last year. Whenever you want something more, you can't enjoy what you already have. Now, have a think about that. Whenever you want something more, you can't enjoy what you already have. And most of us, we always want something more every moment of our life, which means we never have any enjoyment. We're actually afraid of actually stopping still and enjoying what we have. We're always going on the journey. Someone caught me out when I was in my city centre, because I was really busy doing this and doing this. He said, "How are you doing, Ajahn Brahm?" I said, I'm getting there. Have you ever said that word, I'm getting there? And this guy said, "Where are you trying to get to?" And I thought, oh my God, you caught me out. Are you trying to get there? Where are you trying to get to? The only place you're really going to end up is in your coffin. That's where you're getting. So isn't it nice to stop every now and again and stop trying to get somewhere instead of be here? There's one of my other favourite stories. For those of you who've heard these stories before, it's not my fault, because every time I give a talk it's recorded and put on YouTube. I've got no chance. You know, the Buddha was okay, he never had YouTube in those days, or recordings. And I've worked out, I've given so many talks, even in the last 10 years, I've given more talks, this is no exaggeration, this is truth, than the Buddha gave in all his life. You count them in the suttas. I've done more already, so no wonder I repeat myself. But anyway, this is a story of a monk, many years ago. And he was one of these Tudong monks. A Tudong monk wanders from place to place. But we come up to the Pansar, the rains retreat, which is coming in a couple of weeks' time. And so he was wandering in a quiet area of the countryside, and it was close to the start of the rains retreat, and he got his morning meal from this poor farmer who lived in a very simple hut with his family. And the farmer was a very devout Buddhist, and he saw this monk and he said, "Where are you going to stay for the retreat?" And the old monk said, "I haven't decided yet." And so the farmer said, "Why don't you stay close by here? There's a beautiful meadow next to a river. Now I can build you a simple hut. You know, for a monk it's very easy to look after a monk. In fact, when the first monks went to England about 20, almost 30 years ago now, many of the English Buddhists thought, my goodness, can we afford to look after a monk? And so one of them was an accountant, so they did the calculation, and they worked out it's much cheaper to look after a monk than to look after a dog. And from that there's many similarities. You know, we both live in small huts in the garden, eat out of bowls, and we don't bark. At least monks don't bark, and you can pat us, and we always wag our tail whatever you give us to eat. We're very soft and fluffy and cuddly. But the farmer knew it doesn't cost that much, you know, to look after a monk. He would have this beautiful teacher for the rains retreat for him and his family. So the monk agreed. So the farmer built him a nice little hut and fed the monk every day, and the monk would actually teach him just the meaning of life and how to be peaceful, a little bit of meditation. And him and his wife and his kids, they got to love that monk. He even taught the children how to be good kids. And he was such a wonderful part of the family. He became like this very wise and kind grandfather to the whole family. And they grew to love him. But after the end of the retreat, after Ork Pansar, the monk said, now it's time, I've got to go on a journey. And they went on the floor and bowed, please don't go, please don't leave us, we've got to love you, you're so wise, stay here forever, you're like our family. And the monk said, no, I've got to go, like we all have to go. But he said, during this 3-month retreat, my meditation has been very, very deep, and I've got a lot of gratitude for you. During my meditation, I've come across a secret, and I want to give this to you because very close by there's a buried treasure. I don't know who buried it, but it will make you, your whole family, rich. You'll never have to worry anymore about feeding yourself and your kids. And of course, the family knew that this was a monk, an old monk, and old monks don't lie. So because of that, they were actually not that unhappy that he's going to leave, but at least they were going to be rich. And so before the monk left, he gave them instructions on how to find that fortune. He said to the man, he said, because you're poor, you hunt, you've got a bow and arrow. So, tomorrow morning, I want you to stand at the threshold of your house, face the rising sun, and as the sun rises above the horizon, take the bow and arrow and let the arrow fly. Where the arrow falls, you will find an enormous treasure. And the man and his wife listened intently, because this was going to make them rich. So the monk took leave, and the following morning, an hour before sunrise, the husband and his wife were there at the threshold of their house, waiting for the sun to rise. And when the sun rose, there he was with his bow and arrow, and you know what men are like, he gave the wife the spade. And, doesn't matter, karma's going to catch up with the man in the next part of the story. And as the sun rose, he faced the rising sun, he shot the arrow, and they all ran after it, and where the arrow fell, the husband made the wife dig a hole. She dug, this really deep hole, and what did she find? Nothing, only trouble, because that arrow landed in the field of a rich man. And the rich man caught them. He said, you can't destroy my field, I'm going to sue you. And the wife said, it's not my fault, my husband told me to dig. And the husband said, it's not my fault, this old monk told me there's a treasure here. And the rich man said, that's strange, I'm a Buddhist too, and old monks don't lie. What did he say to you? And when the husband told him the instructions, he said, I can see your mistake. You're such a poor farmer. Look how weak you are. You haven't got the strength to properly shoot an arrow from a bow. He said, look, I'll do a deal with you. Tomorrow, I will shoot that arrow. I'm fit and strong because I eat lots. And also, when we find that treasure, we'll split it 50-50. And of course, the farmer had no choice. So the following morning, the rich man was there with the bow and arrow at dawn. And when the sun rose, the rich man shot the arrow towards the rising sun. It went much further. And where it fell, this time it was the husband's job to dig the hole. See, that's what karma is. You ask someone else to do it, and the following day you have to do it yourself. So the husband had to dig the hole where it fell. And they dug, and what did he find? Nothing, only trouble. Because this time, the arrow landed in the field of a general in the army. And the general came with a couple of soldiers and was about to chop their heads off. You're spoiling my property, you can't do this. And the husband said, the rich man told me to do this. And the rich man said, it was this old monk. And the general said, I'm a Buddhist too. Old monks don't lie. What did he say? And when he gave the instructions, the general said, "Oh, look, you're lay people. You don't know how to shoot a bow and arrow. Only a soldier knows how to shoot an arrow from a bow." Said, "Tomorrow morning, I will shoot that arrow, and we'll split it 3 ways." So the following morning, the general was there with the bow and arrow. It doesn't go on much longer, so be patient. The general was there with the arrow and the bow. And as the sun rose, the general shot the arrow towards the rising sun. And that went a great distance, because he was a professional soldier. He'd been training for years, all his life. And where it fell, this time it was the job of the rich man to dig the hole. And he was so fat, he was puffing, but he dug a big hole. And what did he find? Nothing, only trouble, because this time it landed in the field which belonged to His Majesty the King. And that was big trouble. And so the king arrested all of them and brought them to court and said to the general, "Why have you been spoiling my property?" And the general said, "It's a rich man's fault." And the rich man said, "Why did you give him those instructions?" "It's this poor farmer's fault." And he asked the farmer, "Why did you do this?" He said, "It's the old monk's fault." And the king said, "I'm a Buddhist too. Old monks don't lie. There's something strange going on here." So he put all the people in prison for a few days while he sent his soldiers out to search for that old monk. And when they found him, they arrested him, brought him to court, and he investigated the matter in front of everybody. He said, "Old monk, you brought a lot of trouble to a lot of people. Why?" And the old monk said, "Because, sir, they did not follow instructions." And the king said, "What did you mean?" The old monk said, "Sire, tomorrow morning you come to that little hut. You shoot the bow and arrow. And I promise you that you too will find a treasure which will satisfy you. We're going to split it 4 ways, and even a quarter will satisfy a king, let alone satisfying the poor family." And the king was intrigued. So the following morning the king went to that house. Of course, the general was there, the rich man was there, the farmer was there, and so was the monk. So the king stood on the threshold of the hut. "Is that right?" he asked the monk. "Yes, sire, that's right. You're following instructions." He faced the rising sun. "Is that right?" "Yes, sire, correct." He put the arrow in the bow, facing that rising sun. "Correct?" "Yes." He was about to shoot the arrow, and the monk said, "Stop. You're not following instructions." "I didn't say shoot the arrow. I said let the arrow fly." And the king realized he was smart. He took the arrow and let it fly, and it fell between his feet. And there the general dug a very small hole, and they found this huge treasure right between his feet where he was standing. Old monks don't lie. And I'm an old monk now. Where you're sitting, where you are right now, in this body and mind, in this moment, there you will find the great treasure of happiness, more than can satisfy a king, let alone satisfy you. And the meaning of that story is, instead of always going somewhere else to find the treasure, instead of shooting the arrow of craving, over there, when I get rich, when I reconcile with my husband, when I get forgiveness for this, when my political party wins the election next week, no, not in the future. Now, that's the only place you'll find happiness. Let the arrow fly, and it falls right where you're standing. When you want something more, you can't enjoy what you already have. When you let go for a few moments and enjoy this moment right now, you find you have all the happiness you could ever want. Right now. That's why we meditate. Look at me. What have I got? I've got no health insurance. I've got no money in the bank. I've got no stocks and shares. I've got no security. Even just leaving here, I've got no sort of money to pay for a taxi. I don't know when my next meal's coming from tomorrow. Never do, but it always turns up. So as a monk, you realise you just trust in this moment. You have all the happiness you ever want. So that is actually the true happiness. Sometimes that people always want something more, and that's why we don't experience happiness. I gave another little simile years ago, and it's one of my favourite similes now. The difference between a monastery and a prison. The difference between being free and being enclosed, or being imprisoned. Because the prisons in Australia and in many Western countries are very comfortable. You get 3 meals a day, you can watch the TV, you get a nice bed to sleep on, you can play sport. I can't do any of those things in my monastery. In a prison, you can get up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock. I have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning in my monastery. When we told the prisoners we went to visit that we get up at 4 o'clock, they were sort of astounded. So even murderers in solitary confinement don't have to get up that early. What have you monks done? But you feel so happy in a monastery. We've actually got a wall around our monastery. The prison up the road has only got a fence. And quite often it's happened, many times, people have actually gone to the prison up to the road, and it's only 6 kilometres. They say, is this the monastery? No, it's a prison, the monastery's down the road. But, what is the difference between a prison and freedom? You find, even if it's a comfortable jail, if you don't want to be there, it's called a prison. Some years ago I was visiting Japan at a conference, a Buddhist conference, and they put me up in the most amazing hotel. Not as good as the Oriental Hotel, because you can't get better than the Oriental Hotel. But I was stuck in a room with a TV I can't switch on, with a jacuzzi I can't sit in, with a mini bar which I can't touch. Because I'm a monk. Also a bed which I couldn't sleep on, it was too luxurious. And so I thought, gee, this is terrible. And there I was in this 5-star hotel, feeling imprisoned. And I realised even in a 5-star hotel, you can feel like it's a prison for you. And I soon realised, hang on, I'm missing the point. A prison is any place you don't want to be. If you don't want to be in this room right now, this room is like a prison for you. If you're in a marriage you hate, your marriage is a prison. If you're in a job you don't like, or if you're in a family situation which is causing you grief, you just put yourself in a prison. And that's what it feels like. If you're in a body which is aching, sick, dying of cancer or of old age, your body feels like a prison for you. How do you escape from those prisons? Any place I don't want to be is my prison. You don't have to change your partner. You don't have to change your history. You don't have to change your job or heal your body. You just need to change your attitude. You say, I want to be here. Any place you want to be, you're free. Totally free. I've got no choice in what I do in life. Giving talks. Sometimes you saw beforehand people taking photographs of me. I don't know why the hell they do that. I'm 59 and ugly. I'm no supermodel. I'm not Brad Pitt. I think it's totally ridiculous. But anyway, nevertheless, you enjoy it, so off you go. So I'm just happy to be here. And that means wherever situation I'm in, I feel free. On the way here this time to Phuket, my aircraft was delayed for 5 hours in Perth. And a lot of people were very upset and angry. Well, I don't mind. Got to be somewhere. Might as well be in the airport. Because I was happy to be there, there was no suffering. I wasn't in prison anymore. So remember, any place you don't want to be, you've just made that a prison. And the only way to escape from those prisons of life is to change your attitude. Want to be here, wherever that happens to be. And you feel this incredible sense of freedom. If you're old, want to be old. If you're ugly, want to be ugly. There's lots of advantages in being ugly. Especially you women, just people don't start following you. They leave you alone. You can have some peace and freedom, for goodness sake. It must be the worst thing to be a beautiful woman. So just want to be you, whoever you happen to be. And then you feel a great sense of freedom. So this is actually just how to be happy. So in every stage of your life, you're old, you're sick. Even if you're sick, there's many advantages of being sick. You don't have to go to work. People are kind to you, they give you special privileges. So if you ever are sick, please milk it for everything it's worth. You don't have to go to work, which is brilliant. So when you're happy to be here, or you're content to be here, you find far more happiness in life. Yeah, sure, try and get healthy. Yeah, sure, you try and make a bit of money. When I say that when you want to be somewhere else, you can't enjoy where you already are. Obviously, sometimes you have to do that one. You have to go to work. You have to make your plans, but not all the time. Please, 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 take a few moments off in life where you don't want anything else. You're just happy with what you've got, happy where you are. And you'll find those are the greatest moments in your life where you just stop and realize right now, for the next few days, or for the next few hours, or at least for the next few minutes, I've got enough. The next few minutes I don't want anything more except just to be here, with me, with my friends, with my body, with my problems, with everything. I'm just happy to be here. There you find the secret of real happiness. You've let go of the arrow of craving, and it's fallen right where you're standing or sitting, and there you'll find a treasure greater than your wild